Okay, the one fund retirement savings solution. Now, what if you could take care of all of your retirement savings needs with just one fund? Now, we're going to get into this, but before we do, if you find my content valuable, go ahead and hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and hit that notification bell. All right, what if you could just have one fund that takes care of everything as far as your retirement savings? Well, this sort of situation does exist in a type of retirement fund that's called a target date retirement fund. Now, there's quite a few different brokerage firms that have these retirement or target date retirement savings vehicles, or these target date retirement funds. And I really recommend the index variety. In other words, within the target date retirement fund, there are index funds, okay? And companies like Vanguard, Fidelity, and Charles Schwab all have these funds, but I'm going to be talking about Vanguard because Vanguard is a company that I use and trust, so I'm just going to utilize that. But either one of those big three, Vanguard, Fidelity, or Charles Schwab, are all three good companies where you could look at target date retirement funds for your retirement. Now, what I love so much about target date retirement funds is that they take out a lot of the confusion. You only need to answer two questions with a target date retirement fund. All you have to do is ask yourself, how much can you invest? How much can you put into the fund? And then the other question is, when will you need the money? When are you going to get to retirement where you're actually pulling out those funds? I like to call retirement your opportunities and options phase. So the question is when are you going to get to that phase to where you're pulling the money out? Those are the only two questions. How much will you invest? And when will you actually need the money is the second question, okay? So, target date retirement funds, all you got to do is answer those questions, okay? Now, Vanguard has quite a few target date retirement funds. And one of the target date retirement funds is something that you might look at if you're 20 years old. It's target date 2070. Now, the ticker symbol for target date 2070 with Vanguard is VSVNX, okay? And it's if you're 45 years out from retirement, okay? Now, we talked about those two questions. How much can you invest? And I've had many videos to talk about getting rid of debt, having an emergency fund, all of those sort of things. Maybe picking up extra hours at work or a higher position at work, or picking up a side hustle that you maybe turn into a business to create that margin in your budget to where you're able to invest more. But the second question is, when do you need the money? So the 2070 index, target date retirement index fund with Vanguard says that you will be retiring around 2070, the year 2070, or about 45 years out from now. And if you're thinking about retiring, let's say that you're 20 years old and you're thinking about retiring at about age 65, that's 45 years out from now. So this 2070 fund would be a good fund for you to invest in. Let's say that you're more my age. I'm in my mid-50s, okay? Well, there's the retirement fund 2035, okay? So if you're 55, then in about 10 years is approximately when you will be retiring, or year 2035, okay? 10 years from now. It would actually be 2036, but it's close enough. So you would pick that fund, the 2035 indexed target retirement fund, okay, with Vanguard. Now, there's a few things about Vanguard that I'll go over here. The expense ratio is one. With funds, there's different expense ratios, but the expense ratio for Vanguard's target date retirement funds are 0.08%. This is a very, very reasonable expense ratio. That means that if you were to invest $10,000 in a Vanguard target date retirement fund, you would pay about $8 per year for the expenses of the fund. That's very, very reasonable. $10,000 that you have invested, just $8 per year would be coming out to take care of the expenses for the fund, okay? Now, these funds do have a minimum investment with Vanguard. Target date retirement funds with Vanguard have a minimum or starting investment of $1,000. Now, with companies like Fidelity, there is not this minimum starting amount. So that may factor into your decision about which company to go with. If you really don't have much money to get started, Fidelity might be a good place to start because there is no minimum that you have to start with. But with Vanguard, it is $1,000 minimum to get your target date retirement fund started, okay? So that's just something to keep in mind, okay? And let's look at, let's say that you are 20 years old and you were to start a target date retirement fund. And let's say that you're going to go with Vanguard with this 2070 because you're about 45 years out from retirement, okay? Now, how this is set up if you were to start with this 2070 fund is that most of the fund is in stocks. Now, within the fund, I'll mention this, there are 4 different index funds. There's a total stock market, U.S. stock market index fund in there. There's a total international index fund in there that are all stocks. So you have a index fund that's total U.S. stock market, and an index fund that's total international market fund. So that's 2. You also have a total bond fund. That's a U.S. bond fund in there. That's the 3rd fund. And the 4th fund that you have within all of these target date retirement funds is an international, total international bond fund. So you have 4 different funds. U.S. stock, total stock market, total international stock market, index fund. You have a total bond market, U.S. bond fund, and a total international bond fund. So 4 different index funds within the target date retirement fund. So you're very well diversified. But the mix, if you go with the 2070 fund, which if you're about 45 years from retirement, let's say you're about 20 years old and you choose this fund, the mix is going to be approximately, it's going to be approximately, let me look here, I have some notes. It's going to be approximately 90% stocks and 10% bonds, okay? So with this 2070 fund, you're going to have 90% stocks and about 10% bonds, okay? You also have a small amount of short-term reserves, about 0.5%. So 1/2 of 1% you have in the short-term reserves. These are things like money market funds. You know, it can even be cash, but there's money market funds, bank deposits, or short-term bonds. So this is mainly so that they're able to purchase things within the fund. But the basics of it is with the 2070 fund, you're going to have about 90% stocks and 10% bonds, okay? Now let's go to the other extreme. Let's say that you're my age, okay? And you're going to retire in about 10 years, around 2035. So you would choose that 2035 target date retirement fund, about 10 years out. Now with that about 10 years out, your mix is about 67% stocks and 33% bonds. See, it is more conservative. About, again, 67% stocks and 33% bonds. Let's go back to the 2070 fund. Year 2070, 45 years out from retirement, again, you're at 90% stocks, approximately 10% bonds. Why? Because you're further out from retirement. As you get closer to retirement, you want to have more bonds in your mix because the volatility of the stock market, you don't want to be retiring when the stock market is significantly down. There's a phrase that's called sequence of returns risk. I'm not going to go into all of the nuances of the meaning of that, but the bottom line is if you retire and the stock market is significantly down and you have to pull out money during that time, it can really affect what you have in your retirement, because you're pulling out of that as the stock is down, which brings your total balance down, and so your money won't last as long, or at least you won't have the standard of living that you might have projected if you're starting to pull that money out when the stock is down. But by actually adding more bonds to your portfolio over time, you're creating a situation where those bonds kind of smooth out the ride, and when the stock market goes down, it doesn't affect you as much because you have more bonds in your portfolio. In the example of the 2035 fund, you would have 33% bonds that would help to kind of balance that out when you're in retirement if the stock market is down. By the way, all of this is done automatically. That's another power of these target date retirement funds. You don't have to go in there and figure out how many stocks what should my mix of stocks be as opposed to my mix of bonds. It's done for you automatically. There are professionals that have put these target date retirement funds together. So you don't have to be stressed out and worried about, I'm getting older, so I need to change the mix of my portfolio to where I have more bonds when the stock market becomes volatile. If I'm getting close to retirement, you don't have to worry about all that. It's being done for you automatically. These target date retirement funds start out aggressive. Like I said, the 2070 fund with a 20-year-old, they're at 90% stocks, very aggressively, and slowly but surely over time, it becomes more and more bonds, so that by the time they get to retirement age, it's 45 years out with the 2070 fund, by the time they get to year 45, they have a lot more bonds in there. It may look more like 40% bonds, 60% stocks, or something like that, okay? So this is being taken care of for you. And the more and more I talk to people who I'm trying to help, okay? I'm not a financial advisor, and so you definitely want to do your own research. And even when I talk to people, I'll tell them I'm not a financial advisor, but this is what I would do, or from my perspective, what I would do. And more, I'm warming up to these target date retirement funds, because sometimes people just don't want the burden of figuring out how many bonds they need to add to their mix. They're confused about it, or they have anxiety about it. Am I doing this right? Well, you kind of hand it over to the fund company, like Vanguard or Charles Schwab or Fidelity. You kind of hand it over to them to get that mix right with the target date retirement fund, and it automatically becomes more conservative as you're getting closer to retirement. That's the powerful thing here with these target date retirement funds. It takes the burden off of you to figure all of these things out, okay? Again, all you have to do is ask yourself those two questions. How much am I willing or able to invest? And when do I need to pull out the money? Put that in there, and you could theoretically start investing and just invest in that one fund all the way through retirement. I'll just give a short caveat here. There will come a time when you probably want to do something other than a target date. And at that time, maybe you can hire an advisor hourly to kind of look over your shoulder and help you with allocations, or actually do an assets under management where a financial advisor is actually helping you. But this is an easy, simple solution. One fund to take care of your retirement savings. A complete solution all in one. Again, if you find my content valuable, go ahead and hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and hit that notification bell. By the way, commenting is also a helpful way to help folks who are actually watching these videos to have discussion and to open their critical thinking. So down in the comments, tell me what you think about these target date retirement funds. Are you utilizing a target date retirement fund? Is it something that you would consider after watching this video? Thanks again for listening.